Hey, welcome back to the Mobility Project. I've been seeing a lot of shoulders in my clinical practice lately, and one of the things that kind of always consistently strikes me is that many of the athletes that I see don't have a good understanding of kind of the nature of the relationships of shoulders to body, or kind of really what's going on. So the next few series we're going to take on this idea of this kind of floating shoulder joint. And specifically tonight we're going to talk about kind of restoring the relationship of that scapula to the thoracic spine. So we're going to make some organization ideas, or some assumptions that your rib cage isn't down, you're set and organized so that you can turn that musculature on. But thinking about the scapula as it floats around on the body, there's a kind of lot of errors that can get hammered. So we know we've got to get the ribs moving, so we get the ribs out of the way of the scapula. We know that first rib up here, for example, is kind of a piece of that. The ribs back behind the scapula is stiff. Missing thoracic extension, can't pull it out. But specifically, let's talk about some of the soft tissue restrictions between the scapula. So when we see athletes who come with shoulder problems, there's kind of a host of things that we need to keep in mind. But tonight we're going to start with what's the relationship of scapula to body, or scapula to thorax, scapula to trunk, shoulder blade to trunk, and how do I manage that and kind of look at the pieces there. So I think kind of knowing a little anatomy is helpful. Unrequired, but you can have a hammer at this, or take a shot at this. So the first piece is kind of thinking about just pulling the scapula off and kind of stretching rhomboids. There's a big sheet of connective tissue on there. There's even some kind of mysterious scapulothoracic bursa. No, there's no reference to that. But what you're going to see is that there is a joint there between the kind of the rib cage and then that scapula, that connective tissue, that fuzz gets thick there. So one of the things that we can do is definitely pull that thing off, and we do that by pulling across on the shoulder joint. So first homework tonight, we're thinking about working on the relationships of scapula to thoracic spine, and I'm going to turn over into external rotation and load up the shoulder, boom, and then I'm just going to turn away and let that distraction force happen. This is different than me actively impinging my shoulder by pulling across. You shouldn't feel any impingement business, because I'm pulling away. And if you feel like you're overturned and you're feeling impinged, duck down and try to pull different position across your body. So let's go ahead and spend 2 minutes. Now watch what I'm going to do. Take a big breath back there and hang out. I can contract, relax, and then just release. But I just want to let that thing pull off. There's a lot of musculature back there we forget about, like the serratus, posterior, superior. That thing gets tight and ropey and can cause all kinds of havoc. But the more that this shoulder can freely move on my body, the better degree of freedom I have, and the more active my rhomboids and traps are going to be. So that's homework number one. Homework number two is thinking about the relationship of neck to scapula. So scapula attaches to the neck versus through the traps, and also through the levator scapula back here. We've done this before, but I'm just going to flip up in this position. I like the 2-for-1 this, but in this piece, what we're going to do is set up and kind of catch that big levator scapula, which attaches on the core of the scapula and works its way up to the neck. I'm going to load up, and by pulling the arm back, it pulls the scapula back, and then I can really load up. So I'm just creating longer length of that levator. I can hang out here and really kind of get into the corners of my neck. And this will hit some places for you that you'll really shock that are tight. This isn't probably very much trap-ish, and technically we're trying to bias this tissue that we know is in this region that kind of relates, but it's certainly it'd be gross overestimation to say I'm hitting the levator scapula. I'm stretching the neck in this kind of flexion position with the arm back, and what we know is that, without a doubt, that this is a movement, but I can kind of thinking about as it doesn't violate our rules. So here's the second piece tonight, and I just load that thing up, and I'm just camp out. I don't need a lot of pull, I just need a little weight. So the head goes to the side, and then chin down. That's homework number two. Homework number three is working around, is loading this thing from the bottom and see if I can catch the neck. So I'm going to go ahead and load up, actually rotate a little bit, still cultivating that extra rotation, and then I'm going to load my traps, and then just feel that feels very different, and then I get a much bigger trap feel. Mark Bell was talking about, he did this with a heavy kettlebell, or before he deadlifted, and he felt like his stroke was much better. So, any in this position sets that shoulder, basically creating length through the muscle here, and then I'm just going to fall over to the side. This can be done at your desk with just a simple hand behind back, or sit on your hand, and anything we can do, and that's just to the side and then look down at how we lengthen all that musculature. And that is also going to free up. You can't imagine the relationship of tight neck to tight scapula. We see that, or poor floating. We have to think about that relationship. Last relationship tonight, which is a little bit different than the kind of that bony piece. We're going into our soft tissue pieces and muscle pieces tonight. Is that I'm going to go ahead and hammer the pec minor, and that pec minor attaches up to that scapula and pulls it forward, and it gets short. This is one of those things that people love to hammer with this cross syndrome, Yanda's cross syndrome issue, and like, oh, if you release the pec minor, everything happens. No, it's one component in the whole thing. Certainly we're looking through, but as we work on tonight, thinking about these soft tissue restrictions on the scapula, this is one that's worth talking to. So I drive this in, I can do hand behind back, I can put my arm out to the side, and I'm just going to hammer and breathe in. I can drive that thing into that first rib, into that pec minor, and I'm just going to capture, that pec minor attaches here, runs all the way across, and just the insertion of that kind of the top of the sternum here, or top of the chest bone. And you can really feel that there's a big dent, that's pec minor, and then you're into the big pec major. But right here, all of this stuff gets ropey and nasty, and that pec minor pulls you forward into the dreaded bridal wad, what do we call that? The operator shoulder?
Bride shoulder.
Bride shoulder. Operator, scary guy, bride shoulder. So that's the homework tonight. We got 4 pieces. Let's see if you can hammer that with the intention of, hey gosh, I've noticed you have a shoulder problem. Here's one relationship we need to go. We've already hammered the thoracic spine with the double balls. We've got the ribs moving. That's a bony joint kind of issue. Now we're working on taking on the soft tissue issue of the relationship of the scapula to the thoracic spine. All right? See if that feels. Do one side entirely and then feel the difference. And you're going to feel like this side is Frankenstein and this side is supple leopard. Supple leopard. That would be the code name for awesomeness. Supple leopard, out. See you tomorrow.